Shooting on Super 8 can be a fun and characterful way to present a film, but shooting on real film can also present some real challenges, not least of which is the cost. Fortunately, there's an easy answer. Fake it. The Super 8 look is becoming popular again in the filmmaking world, and why not? It invokes a nice retro feeling which can work well for some kinds of subject. There are many guides online to shooting Super 8 and many reasons you might want to do so. Maybe you just want to work with physical film, or maybe you're a wedding videographer offering a Super 8 service to clients. But there are downsides as well. Getting a camera isn't too hard, but getting it working and keeping it maintained could be a hassle. Changing film every 2.5 or 3 minutes of shooting could be a hassle too, though Super 8 does make this very easy. But the cost could be pretty dreadful. To buy, develop and scan a cartridge of Super 8 in the US could easily cost $100, and in the UK over £150, basically £1 a second. Fortunately, there's a cheaper way, assuming that you have access to a digital camera or even a phone, and that is to fake it. You can get pretty convincing results this way, and you don't have to be super tight about how often you press the record button. So let me show you how I've done this. I'm going to walk you through the process I've used and show you some things to think about. The basic idea is to shoot digital, but in a Super 8 style, which could involve shooting handheld, for example, and then process the video to look like film. That could involve using a film emulation software and adding artifacts like grain, dirt, dust, film damage, and maybe a film gate, and so on. Which of these techniques you use and how much and how you apply them are creative choices which are going to depend on just exactly what your goals are, and so of course completely up to you. I'm going to show you my process and you can pick and choose whichever parts seem useful to you. I think the first thing is to start off with a clear idea of what you want to achieve. Do you want to recapture the look of an amateur shot home movie? Or do you want to create a more structured narrative film but with a retro look? Or do you just want to have fun going out and capturing whatever catches your eye? There's no right answer, of course, so it's whatever you want. But I think starting out with a clear idea of your goals can help to set you off on the right path. The camera should be the easy part. Super 8 is pretty low quality and we're going to be distressing our video to look the part, so just about any modern camera can capture high enough quality to be our source material. A smartphone could be a good choice for this. A phone naturally lends itself to being used handheld, and it could easily have enough quality to capture the image you need. A phone's small sensor size will match the depth of field of Super 8. It might be worth getting a video app so that you can control things like frame rate and shutter speed and so on, but even that's not essential. And of course the advantage of a phone is that you may already have one, so the extra cost is zero. An action camera could work too, though most action cameras have very wide-angle lenses, which might not really match the classic Super 8 look. Originally, Super 8 film would have been developed and then projected in a projector which would mat out the legal picture area, so there wouldn't have been any visible film gate, just a rectangular picture. If you want to do this, then it's easy, just crop your digital image to the correct aspect ratio. But nowadays it's common practice to show the gate, and even part or all of the sprocket hole, as if the film had been overscanned and you're showing the whole thing. And this can look pretty cool. If you want to get this look, then you're going to have to overlay a gate image onto your film. Just how much is up to you. You might want to just show a little rectangular gate around the film, maybe with rough edges like a real film gate, or you might want to show some of the sprocket hole. A static image is going to look pretty fake, so an animated image would be best, ideally something scanned from real Super 8 film. Assets like this can be bought online. In my demos you'll see me using a gate image from Argrain. There are different styles of gates because different Super 8 cameras have different shaped film gates. On some scans of real Super 8 film, you'll see the picture extending around the sprocket holes. On others, it's restricted to the actual rectangular picture area. So just choose a gate style that you prefer. In any case, it might be worth thinking about this ahead of time because it could affect the aspect ratio that you shoot for. You should think about your final aspect ratio. If you're going to include a film gate, then you should consider the overall aspect ratio that you're going to deliver, as well as the picture area inside the film gate. The official Super 8 frame size is 5.46 by 4.01 millimeters, giving an aspect ratio of 1.36 to 1, which is about 4 to 3. This should be all you need if you want your movie to have no gate. Actual projected aspect ratios will vary slightly according to the projector, but this will be close enough. If you want the overscan look, then at the extreme full scan, Super 8 is 7.975 by 4.234 millimeters, giving an aspect ratio of 1.88 to 1. Actually, it could be taller than this if you want to include part of the preceding and following frames. Of course, the picture would never fill the whole width, so shooting 16 to 9, which is 1.78 to 1, would be fine, but you could allow the full aspect ratio for your editing timeline. So basically, your main subject aspect ratio should be 4 to 3, but if you want an overscan look, then you can shoot wider than this, and your final output aspect ratio will depend on how much overscan you want. The standard Hollywood frame rate is 24 frames per second, and a lot of Super 8 film was shot at that rate, so if you have a camera that can shoot 24, you're set. However, not all cameras can shoot 24. If you have 25 frames per second as an option, that should be fine. No one will be able to tell the difference. If you have a simple phone app, it might not let you have control over frame rate, but a more advanced third-party app should let you choose 24 as an option. However, a lot of Super 8 film was shot at 18 frames per second. This was done mainly to save film. You can get 3 minutes on a cartridge at that rate. But the downside is that 18 is really too slow. Your film will be really jerky at that rate. But that jerky look is part of the Super 8 aesthetic that you might want to emulate. So how can you do that? If your camera can shoot 18 frames per second, you're set, but this is not common. A lot of cameras can't, and even those that can might not make it easy. For example, my camera can shoot 18 frames per second in a slow and fast mode, which means it shoots 18 but tags the finished file as 24 frames per second. If you use it as is, the motion will be sped up, which is presumably not what you want, so you will need to confirm this in your editor. So check that your editor can do this. HD resolution should be enough, and will keep your files manageable. Then again, you might want to shoot 4K for more insurance. And if you shoot 4K or higher, you have the added option of producing a high-res film from the same source material. How you use the camera is potentially important. If you want your footage to look like it was shot for a serious film, then you might want the camera on a tripod or similar. But if you want a less formal look, then shooting handheld may be the right option. I tried this grip handle under my camera. It helps that the tripod thread is central, so it balances well. And it worked great. In fact, it was a lot of fun and gave me a pretty authentic feeling. This can work well with a phone too. Another option would be to add camera shake using a filter in post. You could even track the motion from a clip that you shot handheld and apply that motion to your tripod footage to get your authentic camera shake. The advantage of using synthetic shake is that you can then deliver a handheld Super 8 looking film and a high-res clean film from the same source material. As you shoot, bear in mind your final picture aspect ratio, which should be about 4 to 3. So don't fill the width of a widescreen camera frame with your subject. If your camera has aspect ratio guides, that could help a lot. And depth of field is a potential issue. With the Super 8 format being so small, Super 8 cameras would naturally have a very deep field of focus. If you shoot on a large sensor camera with a wide open aperture, the depth of field will be very different. This isn't a problem if you just want the Super 8 aesthetic in general, but if you're looking for real authenticity, then maybe stick to shooting with a narrower aperture. And finally, you might want to think about how you shoot. Since Super 8 was largely a family or fun format, people would generally film whatever appealed to them, but then use everything they'd shot. So you might try embracing a more spontaneous, improvisational style. Then again, if you want to shoot a more planned production, that's fine too. After all, one of the advantages of Faux 8 is you can shoot as many takes as you like, because at least the film isn't costing you anything. Having shot your movie, it's time to get it into post and apply the Super 8 look. Just how this works is going to depend on your editing software. I'm using Blackmagic's DaVinci Resolve, but the techniques I show you should work in just about any decent editor. You might just need to do a little bit of research and experimentation to see what your app provides to let you apply these effects. So let's get into it. So first of all, you'll need to make a timeline to actually do your edit on. The simplest way will be to make this the same aspect ratio and frame rate and possibly the same resolution as the final movie you plan to deliver. When you drop footage into it, you can move it around as required to get it into the correct picture area. If the picture area is all you're going to include in the final movie, then that should be easy. If you're going to finish with the overscan look, then you need to allow for the overscanned gate area as well. It might help to create a separate editing timeline containing just the picture, which you then drop into the delivery timeline containing the gate. But that makes things more complicated and probably isn't necessary. One thing you may want to think about is titles. If your movie is going to have titles, how will these be presented? If you add electronic titles in your video editor, these will generally stand out from the Super 8 look of the movie, as if you'd scanned the movie in and then added titles in post, which of course is perfectly valid as long as that's what you want to do. In this case, you should add the titles after the Super 8 look is applied. Another approach would be to go old school by drawing or lettering the titles onto real card and then filming that. I went super low tech by drawing my titles on white paper with a black pen, then filmed them handheld and then just inverted the video. That footage then got the same Super 8 treatment as the rest of the movie. The editing process should be pretty simple. Assemble your clips on a timeline and edit as normal. Probably you'll want to do a simple corrective colour grade on each clip individually to get them looking consistent in terms of exposure and colour and so on. Some modern bright colours might look unnatural on Super 8, so if somebody is wearing a bright red high-vis jacket, for example, you might want to use a colour qualifier to selectively desaturate that. But then again, the film look you add later might do that for you, so check that first. If you're going for the overscanned look, now is a good time to add the film gate overlaid on your edit, so that it gets graded along with the rest of your movie. An animated gate is going to give the best, most realistic look. Make sure to use the correct blend mode when you overlay it on your edit. Don't make the mistake of having the picture show up in the sprocket holes, as there isn't supposed to be any film in there. Whether the picture extends around the sprocket holes is a matter of choice. Different cameras did it in different ways. On top of this, you could add some film damage as well if you like. I used some assets from Argrain to add splices at various points along the movie and visible cuts between some clips, and then a general film damage look to get scratches and dropouts. I probably overdid it, but it matched the kind of look I was going for. You could add things like light leaks here too. Then again, if you have a manual lens, you could get creative and add light leaks by lens whacking during shooting. Don't overdo these things though. A subtle, barely noticeable amount of artifacts will create a subliminal feeling of film without overwhelming the user and making it feel fake. Having got your edit together, you can do the overall grade to create the Super 8 look. This is where having a separate delivery timeline might help, where you pull in your editing timeline as a single clip and then add effects to it. Or your editing software might offer another way of doing this. For example, in Resolve's color page, you can create a timeline grade. Or you might use an adjustment layer. Whatever works for you. The main thing is to make your footage look like old film. It's up to you how accurate you want to be about this. You might have a simple effect to emulate vintage film, or you might use a third-party plugin to emulate a specific film stock. If you're doing it by hand, you should tweak the brightness, contrast and saturation to get the look you want. One thing I think looks nice is to lift the black level so that the blacks aren't a hard, video-looking pure black. Other things you could emulate or adjust beyond that are halation, but make sure not to overdo it on titles, bloom or glow, grain, softness, flicker and gate weave. Third-party overlays could help with some of this. For example, Argrain has scans of real film grain. In the end, I used the Film Look Creator effect in Resolve Studio, which provides grain and a bunch of these other features. You could then add an overall vignette to darken the corners and edges a little. More subtle is probably better here, but as usual it's down to your taste. And then you could add some overall film damage like dirt, scratches and so on, if you wish. You should add sound to your movie. This could be live sound from the subject, or a music score, or a combination of these. Super 8 at one time did have the ability to record sound, although sound film is no longer available. But of course with a digital camera you could easily record sound from your subject to go with your movie. If so, you might want to distress it, for example by limiting the frequency response for authenticity. As usual, that's a matter of taste. But in any case, you might want to add some kind of soundtrack, even if just ambient music. A film with no sound at all feels kind of off, and some people will complain that the audio doesn't work. And with that, you're done and ready to deliver the final movie. Export it as usual and at the correct resolution. No one should have a problem with the 4:3 aspect ratio, or any other aspect ratio really. And don't bother exporting at a high bitrate. Given the analog look we're going for, there's no point. Good enough to avoid visible artifacts is good enough. One thing that surprised me about shooting Faux 8 is that it really is a lot of fun. When I break out the big camera and put it on a tripod and set up to film something in full quality, it feels like I have to have something important to shoot. But with a lightweight camera on a hand grip, just shooting for a Faux 8 project, it feels like I can point the camera at anything that catches my eye and just press record. I guess this is what real Super 8 would have been like back in the day, but it's even more true for Faux 8 since at least the film isn't costing me anything. So it really is a ton of fun. But whatever kind of project you have in mind, whether it's a little fun project or something more planned, the Super 8 look could be a real option, and it needn't cost the earth. In any case, I hope this video has given you some ideas to think about, and thanks for watching.